Welcome everyone to the video. I'm Dr. David Reed Malloy, internal medicine, and this is part 2 in a 3-part series entitled Mastering the 4 Secrets to Healthspan. Your time's valuable, so let's jump right into it. This is part 2, and in part 1, we talked about the Mount Rushmore death, which is no joking matter. The 4 top killers in the United States are cardiovascular disease, cancer, dementia, and this enabler, metabolic disease. This is the true troublemaker. And if we can take out metabolic disease, we can definitely make a lot of these other diseases decline in their prevalence. And of course, for you, that means a better, longer quality of life. So we're going after this bad character here. We also talked about the big food industry and how they get you hooked in the cradle. And unfortunately, this creates what we call the triangle of death. Big food creates big people, and people who are suffering from obesity end up with many chronic diseases. And of course, they're in the doctor's office and then get plugged into big pharma. And then eventually they're having an acute event and now they're in the hospital. And so this triangle of death is unfortunately what most American adults are actually participating in, whether they realize it or not. And what we're trying to do here in part 2 of this video series is to break the cycle. All right, we also covered important lab values and the risk of death in any given 12-month period. We talked about body mass index, hemoglobin A1C, and all these other values. If you didn't see video 1, there's a lot of cool graphs in there, so you can take a look at that and you can look at your lab values or your markers and see what your risks are. Okay, we're going to get into some specifics here in part 2, and just the generic disclaimer. This is not intended for medical advice, any of the information. This is just general information, and you always want to consult a healthcare professional for personalized medical advice. Okay, so what's going on here? How do we escape this vicious cycle of the triangle of death? And just like there are 4 deranged presidents of death on that Mount Rushmore of death, there are 4 legs on the table of health. A patient years ago asked me how to think about his health, and this image popped into mind, and it's just a 4-legged table. Exercise, sleep, mental health, and nutrition are the 4 legs that compose it. And unfortunately, for most American adults, their table is wobbly. They're struggling. It's moaning. The table is groaning, and it's unstable. And eventually, it's just a matter of time before a big bad bull elephant comes and sits on our table. And this could be a financial crisis. It could be a health issue. It could be turbulence in a relationship. You name it. These big bad boys, when they come along, they knock your health down from up here down to here. And no matter how hard you try, if you do survive, that is, you're only going to get your health back up to here. That initial health is gone. We want to prevent against that. It's how a lot of people decline in their overall quality of life. And unfortunately, these big bad boys can hang around for months or years. Let's get into leg number 1. Leg 1 is exercise. There are 4 types: aerobic training, resistance training, aka weightlifting, and then there is flexibility and balance training. We're primarily going to focus on aerobics and resistance in this video. The foundation of your fitness needs to be what we call zone 2 training. And zone 2 training is a exertional effort. And that exertional effort of just being able to speak a full sentence, but you don't want to, that's a very good proxy for what zone 2 training is. And that's where the money is. I think that's what Willie Sutton said. Why they asked him, why do you rob the banks? He said, that's where the money is. Well, the money for your health is in zone 2. The duration of zone 2 training, I don't think anybody has completely figured this out, but 30 minutes is very reasonable and 5 days a week. This is a prescription that you can write yourself. Don't need a doctor. And this is much more impactful than any medication known to man. And we'll cover some of the 7 benefits of zone 2 trainings. So let's just go through them real quickly. Enhanced metabolic flexibility. That's just a fancy way of saying your body's insulin is going to work better. It's going to lower your blood sugars. So you'll need less medication if you are a type 2 diabetic. Increased mitochondrial efficiency. These are the power plants in your cells, and they're going to function more efficiently and give you more energy and make you more productive. Improve cardiovascular health. Your heart will pump more efficiently and lower your blood pressure, and therefore you'll need less blood pressure medicine. Number 4, endurance enhancement. You'll be able to sustain higher levels of exertion for longer. Number 5, improve and reduce the risk of frailty and falling. We talked about frailty in video 1 and the frailty factors. Number 6, reduce all-cause mortality and aging benefits. You'll age slower and reduce the risk of a number of cancers, and then enhance metabolic health and cognitive functioning. When you do zone 2 training, you raise your serotonin levels up. Of course, that helps elevate mood. Also, when we're exercising, our muscles are producing lactic acid, and lactate actually is a signaling protein. It enters into the bloodstream, crosses the blood-brain barrier, and signals the protein to manufacture a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And BDNF is like fertilizer for the neurons in the brain, particularly the hippocampus, which is responsible for short-term memory, integrating new learning, etc. So zone 2 training makes you happier and smarter. This is a graph from the Journal of American Medical Association, and it's just looking at all-cause mortality associated with aerobic exercise. So the folks up here in the left-hand column, this group of participants in the study were the couch potatoes, and you can see as exercise is added, how rapidly the mortality risk drops. For example, walking 30 minutes 5 days a week will reduce all-cause mortality by 30%. Zone 2 training for 30 minutes, you'll pick up another 7%. If you add just a little bit more, probably an extra 5 to 10 minutes per session, you'll get another couple more percentage points. So almost a 40% mortality risk reduction. What are some tips for zone 2 training? If you want to pause the video and look at some of this, that's great. The take home message with this slide is essentially you want to be consistent. You want to do it every morning, because if you put it off to the afternoon, evening, likely not to get done. It's just human nature. We need a piece of equipment to dial in: treadmill, stationary bike, elliptical, rowing machines, and of course, anything else that you like. But the problem with all this stuff is that it ends up as a clothes hanger or in the garage sale eventually. And we need to enjoy our zone 2 training. So using that as mind enhancement time, listening to a podcast, audio book, watching a video, or perhaps listening to music. And I would also say that partner up, get a buddy, a friend, or somebody like that. I think also tracking your progress, seeing how your exertional efforts getting better, and then working with your healthcare provider to see how your lab work is doing. How's your blood pressure coming along? What about medication use? Looking at things like hemoglobin A1C. How's your mood? How's your sleep doing? Tracking these things is very important. High intensity interval training. This is another form of aerobic exercise. Primarily, most of the research was done by the Norwegians, and the Norwegian protocol has spread globally. There's a lot of other protocols out there. This is the one I prefer, and it's a very important thing to do to improve what we call VO2 max. And we'll get into VO2 max and why that's important in just a moment. So we'll go through a high intensity interval training session. You can warm up for 10 minutes initially in zone 2, and then going really hard for 4 minutes for 85 to 90% of your maximum heart rate. And you're cooked at the end of that 4 minutes. So then you dial back, walk briskly or whatever on a treadmill, for example, and then recover fully, and then go at it again for 4 minutes. So this is a 4x4x4 protocol. All right. 2 to 3 times a week will get it done, and that will improve your VO2 max. Okay, what is VO2 max? It's the maximum rate of oxygen consumption during intense exercise. It's a measurement of your aerobic fitness level. It reflects the ability of your body to take in, transport, and utilize oxygen efficiently. What's the impact of VO2 max? When you look at the people in the upper 5%, the elite aerobic athletes, compared to the population in the bottom 20%, there is a 400% reduced risk of death in any given year. And all that is saying is that the more fit you are, the less likely you are to die. Now, I hear you, Doc, I'm not going to be an elite athlete. And this graph is showing that you don't have to be. These are the elite folks down here that have the lowest risk. Up here, we have the people who have the lowest VO2 maxes. Basically, this study was just dividing the participants into quartiles and going from the lowest fit group to below average. That's where most of the reduction takes place. If you take another step and just get to about average, you've got a 60+% reduction in all-cause mortality. So some of the specific other benefits of high-intensity interval training include improving testosterone levels by 30% in middle-aged men, increasing human growth hormone, improved cognitive function and mood, and also combating metabolic disease. And this is really what we're after here in all of these discussions, is getting after metabolic disease. All right. I hear the rest of you. Doc, I'm a senior, or I've got other health issues. I'm not able to do high intensity interval training. I'm not able to do zone 2. This study done in the Journal of American Medical Association shows the impact of just taking steps, just being active. Once again, up here in the left-hand corner, we have the couch potatoes at 2,000 steps per day. You can see that most of the lion's share of improvement is going from 2,000 to 6,000 steps per day. Doesn't take much. And then, of course, as you go higher in the steps per day, we see a law of diminishing returns. And this is sort of where that 10,000 steps per day came from. It was this study. So a lot of health tracking apps have that built into them, etc. Resistance training, well, just like zone 2 and high intensity interval training, building muscle mass improves your overall fitness and reduces the risk of frailty, aka crazy horse. And this curve is one of the most important graphs I can show you. The top part of this, we'll call it the curve of the unfit, and then the bottom, well, the bottom is going to be the fit. But you can see that in the people that are unfit, as they hit their mid 50s, what's happening here is they're entering into frailty. They're starting to have an increased risk of falling. What about the bottom curve, the curve of the fit? If you look at these folks, they don't reach that level until their late 80s. Now, the most important factor that's going to determine whether you live independently or end up in a nursing facility is whether you're falling or not. So we need to train, right? Fitness tips to avoid falling, balance training. There's tons of videos out there. There's courses in most communities. Yoga is wonderful practice for improving core and helping out with balance and flexibility. Strength training. As we get older, we lose muscle mass. If you want to maintain your muscle mass, typically 6 to 7 sets per week for a muscle group will do the trick. But if you want to build, you need 9 sets per week. And make sure we're getting plenty of protein, somewhere in the range of 1.5 to 2 grams per kilogram daily. Canes, walkers, hiking poles, these are things that when I would bring them up to my patients when I first came out of training, almost uniformly they would resist. I finally started talking to patients about how this could be an opportunity in the sense that when you use these devices, you move more and you have more freedom. And once again, the name of the game is movement. So the more steps you take per day, the lower your mortality risk. And of course, the better the quality of your life. Let's jump into leg number 2, which is sleep. We can think of sleep as basically being 2 types, quantity and quality. Let's talk about quantity first. Heart attack and stroke risk are real. Sleep deprivation contributes to high blood pressure, inflammation, and impaired glucose metabolism. We covered all of this in that first video. This is the leprechaun of death, aka metabolic disease. And just having or getting less than 6 hours of sleep per night carries about a 50% increased risk of heart attack or death from coronary disease. Dementia risk, cognitive function is impacted tremendously when we don't get adequate sleep. We have a buildup of amyloid and tau proteins in the brain, which are markers for Alzheimer's. And then chronic sleep deprivation, getting less than 6 hours of sleep is linked to about a 30% increased risk of dementia. Tips to improve sleep, and we probably could do a whole video on this, right? Go to bed and wake up at the same time. That is the number one thing to set that circadian clock. Caffeine and stimulants, limit that to the AM hours. Caffeine has a half-life of 4 hours, and as you get older, your liver doesn't metabolize the caffeine as quickly. It blocks the release of adenosine, which is a molecule that makes you feel sleepy at night. And of course, if you're not sleeping well, so many people, what they do is they drink a soda or a cup of coffee in the mid-afternoon, and they're stuck in this vicious cycle. A lot of folks are drinking 1 to 2 drinks of alcohol per night, besides having a major impact on increasing the risk of cancer and dementia. This is knocking the hell out of their REM and restorative sleep. I'm just amazed at how many patients over the years have told me when they cut out the drinking in the evening, how much better they feel. Of course, they usually lose weight as well. Avoiding blue light, intense exercise, overhead lighting before bedtime. Overhead lighting is a big deal and is underrated because the overhead lighting is striking the bottom of the retina. So it's simulating the midday sun. And what that does is sends a signal to the brain that says, hey, stay awake. It's in the middle of the day. Getting morning sunlight for 20 or 30 minutes. This is a very important thing to do because that starts the countdown on your circadian clock, and the release of adenosine will be more robust 15 to 16 hours later. Sleep quality, things that disturb REM and deep sleep, and there are a lot more things that could go on this list. With 75% of American adults being overweight or obese, obstructive sleep apnea is real. And of course, central sleep apnea is a problem as well. Restless legs, periodic limb movement, grinding the teeth, nocturia. This is the getting up and peeing at night. It's a big one, particularly for folks that are on water pills or diuretics, or people who have swelling in their legs. The body reabsorbs that fluid when we lie down. And of course, the kidneys get rid of it. And then men with enlarged prostates, they're unable to empty their bladder completely. And so their bladder capacity is reduced and they're having to get up frequently. And this can wreak havoc on sleep quality. Pain is underrated, particularly as we get older. If you have a healthy liver, it is perfectly safe to take acetaminophen, 500 to 1,000 milligrams before bedtime. Snoring, how do you know you have a snoring problem? Many people don't. There are a ton of snore apps out there. Just go check them out at the App Store. I recommend that you download them. If you are overweight or obese or not feeling well in the morning, not rested, then this is a smart thing to do. May unveil some other sleep issues like sleep apnea, or perhaps your significant other snores. Maybe your dog snores. It's real. Questions you can ask yourself in the morning: do I feel rested upon awakening after 7 to 8 hours of sleep? Or do you feel sleepy during the day? Do I fall asleep readily during the day? If you answer yes to any of these questions, then a sleep study is indicated. Okay, that's going to conclude part two in the three-part series of Mastering the Four Secrets to Healthspan. And you now have two tools in which to combat metabolic disease and the bad players on the Mount Rushmore death. And of course, we're going to have two more out on our next video, which will be out in the next few days. Hope this information was helpful. And if you found it valuable, please feel free to help us grow the channel, like, subscribe, share it with your family and friends. We're trying to get the word out on how to start taking back our health and combating the horrible pandemic that is metabolic disease and that is ruining the lives of so many people worldwide. We need your help. We need your support. And when you enhance your health, you elevate your life. And the best you is the best hope for our world. I'll see y'all on the next video.